Hey folks, Gary here with Paramount, and I hope everybody out there is having a wonderful Thursday. Today is September 18th. All right, so unfortunately, as I'm looking through social media, we're getting to a point where we're seeing almost unmitigated, quite bizarre conspiracy theories as far as I'm concerned. And look, that causes a real problem because, and I saw this firsthand when people were trying to figure out what was going on during the Trump assassination attempt at Butler, Pennsylvania. You had all these people that were putting in real work. Like, I believe in citizen journalism because I do not believe the government. You should not believe the government narrative. But we also don't want to believe a bunch of con artists and just silly narratives either. We don't want to be tricked by anybody. We need to follow the evidence. We need to pay attention. Like, I don't think all this is ill-intended, but I do think there's people out there that are just overindulging their imagination. And the problem with all that is that it undermines everything else. You have people that are trying to confirm or deny our government narrative, trying to come to the truth. And the problem is when we have all this craziness going on over here from, gun cameras to iPhone cameras, all this stuff, folks, that stuff is so easily disproven. And we may go through each of those, but when people bring legitimate concerns up, it gets all lumped into that. All of it gets dismissed. So the people that are doing this, not ill-intended, and maybe because of some information gaps that we're going to cover today, just understand that there is irreparable harm being done to everything else that is going on with this investigation and people trying to figure out answers. So I want to attempt to dispel some nonsense as quickly as possible and get some information out there so that you can make good decisions on what is truth and not truth based on some facts. So the first thing that I keep hearing in my comment section is a really good tool to kind of get an idea of, some of the perceptions of people out there. I go through and I start seeing a pattern of like people saying this, or this. It helps me to make a video like, hey, this is true or this is not true. And it helps us to reformulate conclusions, right? Because if we have bad information, we're going to come to bad conclusions. So the first incorrect conclusion that leads to other bad conclusions that I hear all the time is I don't believe that was the real shooter because he would not have a line of sight because the alleged shooter's way up here, Charlie's down here, he's underneath a tent. Well, let's take a look at that shooter's line of sight. I don't know why this picture hasn't made the rounds. It would it would prevent a lot of myths, to say the least. This is the alleged shooter's position, and there is a clear line of sight. Now, understand that the person taking this picture is taking this from a standing position. If that person was taking a picture from down the prone, which would be the shooter's perspective, there would be several feet of clearance between Charlie's head and the top of that tent. But even a picture taken from a standing position, it is obvious that the shooter had a crystal clear line of sight to Charlie. The other bad piece of information that I'm seeing floating around everywhere that's leading people to really bad conclusions is the shot angle. I've seen it time and time again where people are talking about this extreme shot angle of like 20, 30 degrees or something like that. Now, I can tell you from a conversation, I posted this on X in a reply somewhere. You guys could check this out, but it was days ago. Somebody was basically referencing, hey, you know what? It doesn't make sense because the shot angle was so extreme that if it hit him in the neck, it would come out middle of his back or something like that. And I said, no, that's crazy. Just from what I was looking at without doing a single calculation, I was like, I think that shot angle is less than 10 degrees. But guess what? To figure that exact shot angle out, you have all the tools you need at your disposal. And that is, you can go to Google Earth. And according to Google Earth, that distance is 138 yards from the alleged shooter's location to Charlie Kirk's location. The difference in height is 72 feet. And what I did is I subtracted 4 foot 10 inches to compensate for the fact that Charlie was not actually on the ground. I'm saying around 4 foot 10 would put the shot where we see it, plus or minus some, right? Now, you don't even have to be a sniper to figure this thing out. You can plug it into our future overlords, and that is AI, ChatGPT, Grok, whatever it is. But by my calculations, what we come out with is in degrees, that angle is about 9.2 degrees. 9.2 degrees is negligible when it comes to a ballistic effect of whether or not you will hit a target at 140 yards or not. Now, while we're there, let's talk about some of the misperceptions when it comes to the firearm itself and the difference between the point of aim, the point of impact. If you zeroed a rifle at 100 yards and you shot a target at 140 yards, the difference is less than 1 minute of angle, and in this instance, it'd be less than 1.3 or so inches. So if he had his rifle zeroed in 100 yards, he could hit 1.5 inches low, 1.5 inches high, left, right, or whatever else. It doesn't matter. Now, the thing about angles, and you can research this, and I don't want to get too technical when it comes to ballistics and angle shooting and anything else, because we're at an angle, basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna use that angle and you subtract a little bit of distance from the target. So while the shot was at around 140 yards, it's probably more like the equivalent of 125 yards if we include the effects of that angle into the ballistic calculation. Now let's talk about the firearm, because I've heard about, there's no way that that firearm would be able to hit a target at 140 yards. Folks, I could take most of you, give you a rifle, give you a 5-minute class on how to shoot, and just standing with an AR, you would be able to hit a man-sized target freehand at 140 yards. 140 yards is nothing. When it comes to precision and long-range shooting, typically what we want from a gun is a minimum accuracy capability or precision capabilities of 1 MOA, which means that gun will shoot a 5-round group in less than an inch at 100 yards. And if it can do that, we say, hey, that's a pretty accurate gun. And what we consider not a very accurate gun is a rifle that would be shooting 2 inches or 2 MOA at 100, 3 MOA. But let's go crazy and say that rifle was so imprecise that it is a 4 MOA gun, meaning that at 100 yards, it would shoot around a 4-inch shot group. At 140 yards, especially after we calculate the angle, we're talking about a group size, if we shot 5 rounds, of around 5 inches. So if a shooter with a 4 MOA gun was aiming at this spot at 140 yards, a crap gun, it would still hit somewhere within this piece of paper. So hopefully with that information, the idea that that rifle, there's no way that that rifle was precise enough to be able to do what it did, hopefully we can pull that out of our calculus and come to better conclusions, right? All right, the other misconception I see going all over the place that is causing people to come to bad conclusions, and then ultimately it also causes them to look for alternative theories that have zero evidence, and really there's a lot of evidence against, is the idea that because of that shot angle, if we were hit here, it would end up, in Charlie's back or something like that. Folks, the difference, I'm estimating, number one, I went with a 10 degree, so I plussed up that degree just to kind of room for error for sure. But basically the neck is gonna be around 10 inches at length or less, right? So I did the calculation for you. At 10 degrees, in 10 inches, the elevation difference is 1.76. 1.76 inches. So this would be the entrance wound, and then it would travel 10 inches, it would exit 1.76 inches below where it entered. But my point with this is that all of this stuff that people are looking for alternative solutions because they, in their mind, based on the misconceptions of the facts that we have here, they're looking for these alternative solutions. Now I'm with you. I'm not interested in, just believing a government narrative or a narrative from mainstream media or anything else. But what I do want to do is, independently of what someone tells me, is I'm going to look at the evidence and I'm going to come to a conclusion based on evidence and information that's solid. When we start looking at these alternative theories, there's so much evidence against them that it just doesn't make sense. Now let's talk about direction of fire and the evidence that we can at least observe, given the crappy video and things like that we have, that can help us determine at least a fairly narrow angle or direction of fire, right? Where that shot originated from. Now there's really only 2 things that we can look at with the information that we have that's gonna help us establish a direction of fire. One is sound, and then the other one is the direction of energy transfer that we can observe. All right, so let's talk about sound. In my last video, around the 22 mark, I'll put that video up there, I show you a recording from a much better microphone, and I talk about sound dynamics and what cell phones do to loud things like gunshots. It distorts them really bad. But this guy in this video, at the 22-minute mark of my last video, go watch that. Now the guy in that video is using a much better microphone, and the sound definitely sounds much more like what we would expect from a .30 caliber round versus the really compressed and bad audio that we're hearing from a lot of other cell phone footage, which is the majority of what all of us are kind of working with, right? But what's more important than the sound, and I'm not gonna play that video because that video was demonetized, and no, I don't care about the money, but any video that is demonetized by YouTube, they just crush it, they pigeonhole that thing, and I wanna get this information out. I don't care about the revenue that comes from the stupid video, but I do wanna get the information out. So I'm not playing that video, so you can go watch it. It's already demonetized at the 22-minute mark. But the point is the immediate reaction of the majority of people in that video, they immediately look in the general direction of where the shots originated, or at least where the alleged shooter was. not in any other direction. Now, I know many of you are out there saying, hey, that guy's a patsy. That was a distraction. And we think the shot came from this trajectory. And again, just like I pointed out in that video, that doesn't make sense. We have someone that is so sophisticated that we can time shots from different locations, which is extremely hard to do. But then on top of that, these very sophisticated assassins are also going to create competing or contradictory trajectories that it's going to be easily seen or found out. Now, the one thing that no one can fake is the direction of energy transfer. And I understand there's a bunch of videos out there from Charlie's different flanks that are really kind of give some deceptive perspectives of kind of where the motion is and the line of the motion, right? But we do have this one video that's almost directly at Charlie's 12 o'clock. And one thing that we see in this video is that we see some sort of, we're not even sure what it is. People are saying it's in-ear monitors. I tend to think it's his necklace, but it doesn't matter. The point is, from this perspective, the most accurate perspective to get a sense of direction is that whatever that is clearly flying straight back, almost straight back. And that movement and direction of transfer of energy aligns almost perfectly with the direction of the alleged shooter. Now, does any of that prove that that shot came from that exact location? Absolutely not. But what I do think it establishes is a very narrow angular window from where a shot could have been fired. All we need to do is follow that direction of energy transfer. And while none of that evidence excludes the possibility of an additional shooter or a different shooter, it has to pretty much be in line with what we're looking at. Somewhere within a very narrow angular window of Charlie goes back, we see that whatever that is fly to his rear. Like that points in that direction. It eliminates almost any possibility of a shot coming from any of these crazy directions that people are, proposing. It definitely eliminates, this crazy spy camera where it shoots him in the back and he moves forward. Like he doesn't move forward, he goes backwards. I'm telling you, some of this stuff is just doing irreparable harm and it just convolutes, confuses everything. And it's gotta stop. Like we gotta sit down and take a look at some of this evidence and stay evidence-based and stay logical, or like there's no way to find out anything. And that's exactly what happened to Butler. And I don't know if that was intentional. I don't know if it's just people going nuts. And that doesn't even take into account the people that are intentionally, for their own personal gain, exploiting Charlie's death and exploiting people's emotions and ignorance. And I'm gonna expose you people for what you are, because I find it so reprehensible. And look, people out there that, like me, I get things wrong, I'm gonna come out and admit it right away. I'm not gonna jump from one theory to the next to keep the money train rolling. I'm gonna show you what I think is taking place. If I get something wrong, I'm gonna come to you and say, look, I got this wrong. Like, we gotta figure out a different solution. What I'm not gonna do is look for the most, provocative, nonsensical theory and then try to find this evidence that supports it. And by the way, then what they do is they go around and they attack and try to destroy anybody that proves them wrong with logic, reason, and evidence. That is what they do. They're gaslighting at their best. They start calling people government agents, all these things. Like, it's their MO. I find it disgusting, and I don't know what else to say about it. All right, folks, I hope that was helpful. I hope that was informative. Hopefully that will help you be able to discern fact from fiction and truth tellers from con artists. And again, I know there's some people out there that are gonna get things wrong and they're completely earnest in their efforts. I understand that. And hopefully this will help them to kind of recalculate how they're looking at things. And if I find some new information that proves me all wrong, I'm gonna recalculate and I'm gonna come to you and I'm gonna tell you about it. We need to be aware. I don't wanna be tricked by the government, but I sure don't wanna be tricked by clowns out there either. All right, until next time, stay armed, stay ready. We'll talk to you soon.